Okay, today we are going to review Chapter 4, which has a lot to do with graphing equations, okay? So example number 1, what they want us to do before we get into any graphing at all or any slope-intercept form, they want us to figure out, is this ordered pair, which these numbers right here we know is an ordered pair. The first number always represents x. The second number always represents y. Is it going to be a solution to the equation that they have given us? So here's our equation. So don't forget, whenever you have an ordered pair, that would be a point on a graph, okay? It's always listed x, comma, y. All right, so what they want me to do is they want me to plug in these numbers and just find out, is it going to be a solution? So what I do is I know that 4 is my x, and negative 5 is my y, so I plug them in exactly where they're supposed to go. 4 times 4 plus 3 times negative 5 is equal to 1. And I just want to see, is this a solution? Okay? 4 times 4 is 16. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15 equals 1. 16 minus 15 is 1. 1 does equal 1, so we know that yes, it is a solution. And you can just write yes. You don't have to write yes solution. Okay? So let's try the next ordered pair. Again, remember, it's always x comma y. So the negative 2 is my x and the 7 is my y. So I'm going to plug in 7 equals negative 2 times negative 2 plus 5. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4 plus 5. 7 equals 9. Is that ordered pair a solution to the equation? No, it is not. Okay? And what it means is when it's a solution, let's say, okay, this equation right here represents a line on a graph. So let's say this is our graph and this is our line that we have. When a point is a solution, that means that point falls on the line. When it's not a solution, it's like somewhere over here and it does not touch our line. That's all that means there, okay? So example number 2, rewrite the equation in function form, then use a table of values to graph this. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to write this in function form. Function form means that the y has to be by itself. When your equation is in function form, it should always read y equals whatever. There should be no number in front of y that I can see. There should be nothing there. So if it's not written like this equation does not start out like this. It says negative 4x plus y equals negative 3. So I need to get that y by itself. Who can tell me, what would I do? What would I need to move in order to get that y by itself? Anybody see what I need to move? The negative 4x. This has to go from this side of the equation to this side. And what's the only way to make it move from one side to the other? Add it. Very good, because it's a negative. So I plus 4x to both sides, which cancels it out here. And I add it here. Now, question. Can I add negative 3 and 4x and get 1x? No, because they are not like terms. So I just write them side by side. And you always want to write the number in x first. So I would write y equals 4x minus 3. Okay? Does that make sense? You always want to write the number with the x first and then the number by itself last. Okay, so now I've got this equation in function form because it's y equals whatever. And they want me to use a table of values to graph. That means I'm going to plug in certain numbers for x and solve for y. Okay, these are the 3 numbers that I always want you to use for x. So we make our x and y chart here. And the numbers that I always want you to use for x are negative 1, 0, and 1. I always want you to plug in those three numbers for x, okay? That way everybody's line should look the same. We all get the same number. You're not graphing like 5 different numbers, okay? You want a negative number, a 0, and a positive number. So we do -1, 0, and 1. So all I need to do now is plug each of these into the equation for x and solve for y so I can graph it. So I do y equals 4. And then instead of the x, I'm going to plug in -1 minus 3. What's 4 times -1? -4 minus 3 is what? -7. Very good. Okay. Next one, let's plug in 0. Y equals 4 times 0 minus 3. What's 4 times 0? 0. So what does y equal? -3. Okay, next one. Y equals 4 times 1 minus 3. What's 4 times 1? 4. 4 minus 3 is 1. Okay, so what I need to do now is I need to graph this. And I want to graph it on a coordinate plane. So if you don't have any graph paper, which you can just do this on a regular piece of paper, okay, you're going to take and you're going to make your, I'm going to erase this work right here. We're going to make our coordinate plane. Oops, my line wasn't straight. Well, it's just not going to be straight. Okay. All right, so I've got a -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, -1, -2, -3, -4. Okay, who can tell me what axis is this? X. And what's the one that goes straight up and down? Y. Very good. Okay, so I need to plot each of these points. So let's do our first point, which is -1, -7. So I go over to the -1 on the x value and down to the -7 and plot my first point here. Then I'm going to go over to 0, which is right here in the middle, down to -3, then over to 1, up 1. And all you've got to do now is draw your line through the dots. Okay? Oops, I don't know if I was doing that. Anybody have any questions over how to graph using an X and Y chart? All right. Example 3. Find the intercepts of the equation, okay? An intercept on a graph, all right, if I were to have a graph that looks like this, this is my X axis, this is my Y. If I were to have a line that went through it, where the line crosses the x-axis is my x-intercept, and where the line crosses my y-axis is my y-intercept. There is a very, very simple way to find these intercepts, okay? How you do it is, if you want to find the x-intercept, all I need to do is plug in a 0 for y. If I want to find the y-intercept, all I do is plug in a 0 for x and solve. Okay, so let's try that. Let's find the x-intercept first. So I've got 3x. Remember, whatever intercept you're trying to find, you leave that letter in there. So if you want to find the x-intercept, leave the x there. So I take out the y and plug in a 0 equals 12. Well, what's 4 times 0? 0. Basically, it just goes away. So now I have 3x equals 12. What would I do to solve for x? Divide by 3. And what is my x-intercept? 4. So I know if I were to graph this line, the line would cross the x-axis at positive 4. Okay, let's find the y-intercept. So again, whatever intercept you're trying to find, you leave that number in there. So I'm going to do 3 times 0, I take out the x, plus 4y equals 12. What happens to this 3 times 0? Goes away. and then I divide each side by 4, and I get y is equal to 3. So I know my line crosses the y-axis at positive 3. So if I were to graph this line, it would look like this. It would cross the x-axis at positive 4 and the y-axis at positive 3. Oops, that's not a very straight line, okay? It would go just like that. All right, so that's how you find the x and y-axis. So let's do this next one together. If I want to find the x-intercept, Dominic, what am I plugging in and for what variable? 0 for y. Perfect. All right, let's do that. 2x plus 3 times 0 equals negative 6. 3 times 0 is 0. So then I know all I need to do is what, Danielle, to solve for x? And what would I do when I get 2x equals negative 6? Divide by 2. Perfect. And Tommy, what is my x-intercept? What kind of 3? Negative 3. Very good. Okay, Danielle, I want to find my y-intercept. So what am I plugging in and for what? 2 times 0. Perfect.
Plus 3y equals negative 6.
Very good. Okay, Devin, what happens? Perfect. And then you divide by 3. And what is my y-intercept, Dominic? Negative 2. Perfect. Okay. Okay, now we're dealing with slope, all right? Slope is the way that my line is tilted. We've got 4 different slopes. We've got a rising slope, which rises from left to right, so my line will look like this. I've got a falling slope, which will look like this. My line falls from left to right. I've got a line with no slope, which is a horizontal line, and then a line with a vertical slope, which is undefined. Okay, so there's 4 different types of slopes. And what they want me to do is they want me to actually find the slope. Slope is always represented by the letter M. Always. I don't know why. I would choose the letter S if it were up to me, but nobody asked me. Okay, so it's always defined by the letter M. And slope is always rise over run. Okay? And there is a certain formula to find this. I want you to write this formula down. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay? Those 2's and that 1's just tells me what order the numbers, because this is x1, y1, this is x2, y2. Because each ordered pair is listed x comma y. So if I've got 2 ordered pairs, I've got to distinguish. Oh, this is my first set and this is my second set. Okay, so in order to find the slope, this is the formula that I'm going to use. All right, and you got to think about it this way. Because it's rise over run, think about it. Rising, the slope or the axis on my graph that is rising is my y-axis. That's why that comes first. And the slope that goes from left to right or running is the x. That's why that comes on the bottom. Okay, so let's plug each of these numbers in. So I'm going to write M equals. What is y2, Tommy? Three. Very good. And I have to make sure it's subtraction. What is y1, Devin? 4. Very good. Okay. Dominic, what is x2? 4. And Danielle, what is x1? 5. Very good. Okay. Excuse me. Now all you want to do here is subtract. 3 minus 4 is what? What kind of 1? Negative 1. 4 minus 5 is negative 1. What is negative 1 over negative 1?
1.
Positive 1. So my slope is 1. Okay? Let's do the next one. Use the same formula. M equals, what am I plugging in first, Tommy? 5. Then Devin, what comes next?
4.
4. What goes in between the 5 and the 4?
Plus the addition.
Not addition.
Subtraction.
Subtraction. Very good. All right, Danielle, what comes next?
Negative 1.
-1. Then Dominic, what comes last? 2. And what sign goes in between them? Subtraction. Okay? 5 minus 4 is 1. Negative 1 minus 2 is what?
Negative 3.
-3. Can I simplify this fraction at all? Nope. So this is my slope. I would go up 1 and then towards the negative side 3. Okay? Okay. Next example. But first of all, before we get into it, I want you to write this down. Graphing an equation. There is a certain form in algebra that you have to know where it is always going to come up, and that is slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. Now, if you'll remember, the m, we just learned that, represents slope. And the letter b in this equation represents the y-intercept. Now, if you remember, in 2 examples ago, we learned how to find the y-intercept. Remember, we just plugged in the 0 for x and solved for y. And we said the y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis. That's all that the y-intercept is, okay? So for an equation to be in slope-intercept, I've got to know 2 things. I've got to know the y-intercept, and I've got to know my slope. Those are the 2 main things that you have to know, okay? And in order to graph a line using slope-intercept, you have to graph the y-intercept first, okay? And then use my slope to find the next. So let's say this was an equation. Y equals 2x plus 1. Okay, let's go ahead and label. Devin, what is my m in this equation? 2. And Tommy, what is my b? 1. Okay, if they told me, I want you to graph this, I would draw a graph here. Okay, and I know I have to plot the y-intercept first. So which one of these is the y-intercept, the m or the b? Who knows? The b. So what I do is I go to the y-axis and I find that exact number. If it's +1, I go to +1 and I place my point there. Then I use the slope, which remember is rise over run. But you say, well, that's not a fraction. How do I know what it is? Okay, let's make it a fraction. 2 over 1. So I'm going to rise 2, so I go up +2 and over +1, because this is the positive side on the x-axis, this is the negative side on the x-axis. And I can draw my line using slope-intercept form. Okay? So remember, the 2 main things that you have to know are the slope and the y-intercept. We always graph the y-intercept first, then use the slope to find my next point. Okay? So what they want us to do is rewrite the equation in slope-intercept and then graph it. So remember, let's rewrite. What is slope-intercept? What's that equation? Who can remember it? If you don't have it memorized, you need to memorize it, which is y equals mx plus b. So basically, I've got to get y by itself. Remember function form? That's exactly what I'm doing here. So what do I need to move in order to get y by itself? Look at this first equation. -3. And how would I move it?
Add 3x.
Perfect. Add 3x. This cancels out, and I get y equals, what do I have to write first on that other side? Who knows? Can I add -1 and 3x together? No, I know they're not like terms. So then the 3x has to come first. negative 1 has to go second. You always want to write the x first, okay? Now, let's label the m and the b, because remember I said the two only important things in slope-intercept form are m and b. So, Dominic, what is my m of this equation, or my slope? 3. And let's go ahead and write it as a fraction, so that's done. So I write it as 3 over 1, okay? What is my b, Danielle? Perfect. Negative 1. Don't forget, this sign right here goes with your b. All right, so now we need to graph it. So I draw a graph here. This is my x-axis. This is my y-axis. Each of these lines represent a 1, so this would be negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. 1, 2, and 3. Negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. 1, 2, and 3. Okay? So what am I going to graph first? What do I know I have to graph first? The y-intercept. What is the y-intercept in this equation? Negative 1. So I go to my y-axis, which is this right here. Okay? And I find negative 1 on that y-axis, which is right here. I plot my first point. Then I use my slope, which is 3 over 1. So I know it's rise over run. So I have to go up 3. Why do I go up 3 instead of down 3? Because it's positive. So I go up 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to go over to the positive side 1, which is right here. Okay? And then all you got to do now is draw your line. Okay, anybody have any questions so far on that? Okay, let's do the next one then. They want us to write it in y equals mx plus b form or slope-intercept form. So this one is a little trickier. What do I need to move first? The positive 2, and how would I move it? Subtract it, perfect. So I subtract it here. Do I need to subtract it from negative 3y? No, absolutely not. I just move it over to this side. Now I have negative 3y equals negative 2x plus 12. What would I have to do now, Tommy? I don't want to add 3 because I got to get y by itself. So I got to ask myself, what's happening between the negative 3 and the y? It is multiplying, so I need to divide. So I divide this by negative 3, which cancels out. And then remember, I need to divide everything over here by negative 3. So now I get y equals, what's negative 2 over negative 3? Positive 2/3. Perfect. X. What's 12 divided by negative 3? Negative 4. Okay, let's label m and b. What is my m of this equation? 2/3. It's already in rise over run. What's my b? Negative 4. Okay, let's graph this. Okay, this is my y-axis, this is my x. What do I have to graph first? Who can tell me? What do I need to graph first, Danielle? The b, so where would I go on this graph? Perfect. I find my y-axis and I go to the negative 4. Put my first point. Then where would I go from there, Dominic? Close. Up 2, perfect, because remember it's rise over run. So I go up 2 and it's 2/3, and then where would I go? Over 3. And which direction? Am I going to go this way 3 or this way 3? To the positive. Very good. So I go over 3. And I put my point there, then draw my line that goes through it. Okay? All right, that is the end.